Jon Rothstein, CBS Sports college hoops analyst. It is my understanding that Jon is the only person of media member in the bubble. Is that true, Jon?
That is correct, fellas.
Nice, man. So, okay, well, first of all, welcome back. It's been a little bit. What is I've seen some social media hits, but what is the bubble like for you? Give us a sense. What'd you do today? What happened today?
Well, Brandon, for me personally, I'm in what is obviously called Tier 2. There's different tiers, and, there's different, obviously, restrictions on each tier. So pretty much, essentially, I can either be in my hotel room, I can be where I am right now, which is at the Indianapolis Convention Center, where every single team practices, and obviously, I have a war room type setup where I can watch all of the games and track all the games and do reports from, or I can be on site at a game. But those are the only three places that I am allowed to be for 25 days. And, I came here, 2 days before selection Sunday, and then I'll obviously be here through the duration and fly back to New York on Tuesday morning, April the 6th.
It's a great honor, and they picked the right person to do it, man. Good for you, Jon. That a boy.
Absolutely. Now, Jon, we've been having some conversations offline about this transfer issue before we get to the games here. This is getting a little serious, and at first I didn't know what you were talking about. Then I went and looked up transfer. There's 110, maybe even more of those guys at this point.
There's 1,000 transfers.
But I'm talking about the major ones. But this is becoming a serious issue, and we've heard some of the college coaches, Andy Infeld, talk about this and how disruptive it is to their programs. This is getting a little bit out of control, or is this way out of control?
Well, Tiki, I believe you, Brandon, and I spoke about this, when the topic was really coming up, last summer. And, we're in a time right now where I get it, we're obviously trending towards, more rights for student athletes, and they should have more rights. They should be able to pursue their name, image, and likeness and try to obviously benefit from those opportunities. But the transfer situation has a number of unintended consequences. One thing that I think needs to be pointed out as well, which has been discussed, if this obviously gets passed through legislation, is a notification date for players that they have to inform their teams that they're going to transfer by, whether it's April 15th or May 1st or a later date, because you're seeing right now, I think, what we all forecasted, who obviously have deep familiarity within the sport, and that's straight anarchy. And that's something that I think, we have seen here the last couple of weeks with the volume and the number of players who are opting to do it. And, I use the term unintended consequences. Let's start obviously with high school kids. There is no reason why a coach who obviously wants to fill a roster spot at this point is going to take a high school kid over a potential proven college player in the transfer portal if somebody is seasoned and is obviously proven as a producer. And on top of that, you're also going to be more apprehensive about taking a high school player if you take that player and you develop him, and then he has an opportunity to transfer after that. Now, here's another thing to keep in mind, which, again, isn't getting the attention it deserves, but you guys were both obviously very successful Division I athletes, so you understand this as well. When you look at the scenario that what happens academically, approximately 12 to 18 credits are lost every time a student-athlete transfers from one school to another. Yep. Without a year in residence, which is a sit-out year, you are going to have more and more student-athletes lose credits and fall behind on their academics. So the graduation rates for all of these student-athletes are going to drop significantly. These are all things that, not a lot of people are talking about, but are just facts of life when you really split the atom on, obviously, this polarizing issue.
Well, here's the other thing, too, and I guess you gave us about 3 or 4 things, and they're all on the money, but something else that I know you're passionate about, and I know I am as well, and I'm sure Tiki is, too. It bothers me, and I understand it is what it is, but it bothers me, say, you have a mid-major, and pick a conference, doesn't really matter, but you have a mid-major. You identify a kid, maybe not quite as polished, but from a good program, well-coached, only a 2-star kid, maybe a 1-star kid. He comes in, you coach him up, he pops, he gets better, he becomes a conference player of the year as a mid-major, and instead of riding that young man to an NCAA tournament berth, which is what used to happen for decades, the young man says, well, I've outgrown the place, I'm bouncing, peace, I'm going to a bigger school, and you kind of left holding your hat in your hand, and you got to start over for the mid-major.
No question, Brandon. And, we have seen multiple mid-major programs over the past couple of years deal with that. Robert Morris has dealt with that with Andy Toole. We have seen, again, different programs in this NCAA tournament take mid-major players and obviously add them on a one-year type situation and have them in their rotation. 4 of USC's primary 8 players the other night against Kansas were transfers who weren't active in their program last year. So, I know the three of us had some dialogue about this last summer when it came to the forefront, and nobody foresaw the obviously unintended consequences. But, we're seeing it right now. And again, I want to make this clear. Everybody has the right to do exactly what they want to do with their life. And yes, we need to do more for student athletes. They need to be able to exercise their rights to earn off their name, image, and likeness. That all has to happen. But for the health of college athletics, I think it's important to try and stabilize this rule as we move forward here right now, because we're seeing this, guys. And here's another thing. If this number of transfers in college basketball gets to, 1,500 or 2,000, another thing that's going to happen is this. There might be 300, 400, 500 kids who don't have a school.
Yeah.
If they wait too long. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
Or
they're
just
1,000%. And Brandon, here's another thing which you understand.
Yeah.
I've talked to a lot of coaches about this. It's very difficult to keep players happy if you have 13 players who are on scholarship and active scholarship players. That is why we've seen coaches redshirt kids so much, because it's easier to manage your rotation. You're going to see a lot of programs only have 10 or 11 kids on scholarship for that very reason.
Yeah.
If 200 programs in Division I, let's say, only have 11 scholarship players, right there, that's 400 less scholarship opportunities for kids to go to Division I basketball.
Fewer seats at the table, guys, there's no doubt. We're talking to Jon Rothstein, and Jon is the only media person in the bubble during the entire tournament. He's reporting for CBS Turner, CBS Sports Network. Jon, 4 games Saturday, 4 Sunday. Obviously, we want to hit that, but we would be remiss. Listen, are you convinced that Shaka was absolutely going to get fired, number one? And number two, I think it's a great pivot by Marquette. But address those. Do you like the hire from Marquette, and was he absolutely a goner at Texas?
It's a funny situation because 2 Saturdays ago, Shaka Smart had one of his professional highs when he won a Big 12 tournament championship at Texas in the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City. 7 days later, he has a professional low when they lose to Abilene Christian in the first round. You take a job with the pedigree of Texas, you're expected to advance in the NCAA tournament. Shaka hadn't won an NCAA tournament game at Texas. Obviously, he and Texas probably thought it was time to part ways. I don't want to speculate on speculation, but it's best, obviously, for all parties involved that this happened. I think, Brandon, and I've said this since Shaka took the job in 2015 in Austin, he was better, his brand was better personally at a basketball-centric school. We saw that at VCU. He now goes to Marquette, a place that's going to sell out every night, that has great fan support, that has tremendous resources, and plays in a basketball-centric conference. Shaka Smart is more made to raise the ceiling at Marquette, in my opinion, than he was at the University of Texas. It's more synonymous with the type of structure that he saw at VCU.
Yeah, no, I think that's BT and I were talking about that in the previous segment, Jon. You're dead on about that.
Yep.
All right, the West, the East, and the South all have their number ones still available, Gonzaga, Michigan, and Baylor, respectively. The Midwest is a little bit chaotic with Syracuse and Loyola.
Right.
There's some. It's really, it almost makes it the most interesting of the regions that's left. You concur?
No, I definitely concur, Tiki, and I want to point this out as well. This is not a coronation for Loyola Chicago because Oregon State has the size up front with Roman Silva and Warith Alatishe, a transfer from Nichols, to really make life difficult for Cameron Krutwig. And also Oregon State has a guard in Ethan Thompson, who's the son of Stevie Thompson, who's an Oregon State assistant who obviously was a great player at Syracuse years ago. Yeah. Who's one of the best guards nationally that not a lot of people know about. So this is not a coronation for Loyola Chicago. It was a great story. And then in the other game in that region, you have Houston against Syracuse. Now, people might say, well, that's not really that trendy a matchup on paper. But Kelvin Sampson and Jim Boeheim have a deep history together in the NCAA tournament. 18 years ago, in 2003, Syracuse beat Oklahoma in the East Regional Final in Albany to advance to the Final Four. Syracuse wound up winning a national championship. Who was the coach of that Oklahoma team? It was Kelvin Sampson. Oklahoma could never solve the 2-3 zone. Syracuse won 63-47, won a national championship. But I think, guys, too, the job that Sampson has done this year, okay, at Houston is vastly, vastly underrated, and I'll tell you why. When we look at the dynamic with Kelvin Sampson this year, they're 25-3, they're in the Sweet 16. Houston lost the American Athletic Conference Player of the Year, Caleb Mills, in the middle of the season, and still wound up getting a number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. Now you're in a situation where, for all intents and purposes, you've got a team that's 25-3 without the preseason Player of the Year in the conference. That's saying something.
And one of the reasons why Sampson got the extension he did, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There you go. So that's Jon Rothstein with us here, Tiki and Tierney, CBS Sports Radio. You know, John, I said earlier to Tiki that I was surprised that, like, when Woj got the job at Marquette, I was expecting a gritty, tough, tenacious, defensive-driven team. Instead, in large part, it was pretty much a race to 90 points. They were relatively soft on defense, but relatively explosive on offense. And I bring that up because it's taken a while for UCLA to, I think, replicate, get that tenacity gene from Cronin that had that for all those years at Cincinnati. But it seems like they've finally taken on the personality of their head coach, who's a scrapper, as you know. Are we giving the Bruins a real chance to win this game or what? Are they going to win?
It would be extremely difficult for UCLA to win this game. Alabama's a juggernaut. They're dynamic on both sides of the floor. But let's just point out for a second, what Mick Cronin has done at UCLA this year. UCLA's primary prize recruit this year, Dacian Nix, never showed up to campus. He went to the NBA G League elite situation. Now we have a scenario where you have a Jalen Suggs caliber recruit, okay, be in a scenario where he doesn't show up to campus. Then Chris Smith, UCLA's best returning player, tears his ACL. Then UCLA's Jalen Hill, who's their best defensive big man, leaves the team for personal reasons, and UCLA still finds a way to get to a Sweet 16. So I think obviously it's important to look at the matchup and all of that, but I mean, just the fact that UCLA that is here is miraculous, considering they lost again 60% of what their projected starting five was.
You laid that out well. Go ahead, T.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. Tell me, my favorite team in this bracket in the tournament still, Oral Roberts has a chance. I know they're basically limited to 2 scorers, but tell me they have a chance against Arkansas.
Well, when you have A. Smith and O'Banner on your team, you're going to have a puncher's chance because, let's face it, that is one of the better 1-2 punches that there is in this NCAA tournament remaining. But beyond that, Tiki, 3 through 7, what is Oral Roberts going to bring to the table? Pace is a big thing with Arkansas. They were dominant with the pace, obviously, against Colgate. Texas Tech did a great job of slowing them down, and now they're in a situation where, again, I think Arkansas has a golden opportunity to get to a regional final for the first time since 1995 when they were the national runner-up with Nolan Richardson the year after they won a national championship and fell to UCLA 89-78 in the 95 title game.
I mean, this guy's referencing scores from 20 years ago. He's out of his mind. We talked about that team the other day. Corliss was
the year before.
It was the year before. That actually came up on the show.
Corliss was on the 95 team.
No, I know. But I'm saying the 96 team. He was. No, I got you. So we're talking to Jon Rothstein. John is in the bubble. And the only media member with that access, which is great, great for us, great for you, because he's all over it. CBS, Turner, CBS Sports Network. John, I know it doesn't work this way, so we're lucky. But if I said, all right, man, we all know how much you love this game and this sport. It's basically your religion, If you had one game of the 8 that you had to choose, this is the game that I would pick to watch, which one would it be and why?
Florida State, Michigan.
Go ahead.
It's the best matchup of the Sweet 16. Michigan has, been one of the more complete teams in the sport all year long, and Florida State, become right now the program that has been consistently at bat over the last couple of seasons and has not gotten to the Final Four. This is the only thing that's left to do in Leonard Hamilton's career. Leonard Hamilton, just needs to get to a Final Four because he's been at bat so many times. They've been to the second weekend in each of the last 3 NCAA tournaments. And, guys, here's an interesting thing when you want to talk about the power of the culture in Florida State's program. This is the 3rd straight year that Florida State has had a potential first-round pick come off the bench. A couple of years ago, it was Fiondu Kabengele. Last year was Patrick Williams. And this year, it's Scotty Barnes, who hasn't had maybe the type of freshman season that many anticipated, but is still the best long-term prospect in this game. So if there's one game I have to watch, it's definitely Florida State, Michigan.
Last one for you, John. We know that Glon Kruger retired, so Oklahoma has a vacancy. Texas, we talked about with Shaka Smart, they have a vacancy. And Indiana, IU has a vacancy, and it doesn't seem like an elite program. Any insights in any of those three, particularly the last one, IU?
Well, Indiana has entertained, candidates who have ties to the Hoosiers program over the last 5 to 7 days in an effort to maybe take a run like Michigan did with Juwan Howard to bring back a former player that has pedigree and cachet. I also have been told that they're keeping close tabs on Loyola Chicago's Porter Moser. However, you have to understand that the longer Loyola plays, the more that potentially delays Indiana's courtship of him if he is a candidate. Oklahoma is in a situation where they're obviously going to view and vet obviously potential sitting head coaches. If they go the mid-major route, two names to keep an eye on are North Texas's Grant McCasland and Oral Roberts' Paul Mills. Obviously, this is still very premature. They also have an in-house candidate in top assistant Carlin Hartman. And as far as Texas goes, this starts and could end with Chris Beard. Chris Beard was a manager for Tom Penders at the University of Texas. He also has a hefty buyout from, obviously, Texas Tech if he should take a job in the state of Texas. And I will tell you this, I had a long conversation with Kirby Hockett, the athletic director at Texas Tech, about a week ago, and he told me that regardless of whether or not Chris Beard is courted for another job, Texas Tech is going to do everything it can to keep him as their basketball coach. They know very, very well that they were inches away from winning a national championship 2 years ago in 2019. Texas Tech is also going to do, obviously, great refurbishments to their program, open up a brand-new practice facility. Chris Beard makes an excess right now of $4.5 million a year. Texas Tech would obviously have to redo his contract if Texas comes calling, and I think that search is pretty clear. It begins and ends with one person, the head coach of Texas Tech, Chris Beard.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell to be notified when we drop fresh content.